Let's speak to Sarge Karim, who's a Conservative MEP for the North West. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Joe.
So you backed Theresa May from the start, but I guess you didn't expect this.
Well, the way things were unfolding, actually, one really couldn't have in any way predicted what scenario would emerge. This was one of several scenarios that could have emerged, and really, to my mind, I'm not taken by surprise at all. It really is a very interesting time in British and European politics where literally absolutely anything can happen, and I think we're demonstrating that in the UK.
Now, Theresa May will become the Prime Minister this week, it would seem, but nobody's voted for her. Is that fair?
Well, it's part of the constitutional arrangements. A new person needs to be brought forward, and these are the arrangements that exist to allow it to happen. I would, and indeed Theresa would much taken place at least within the Conservative Party, but the way things have worked out, that is not the course that has been adopted.
In terms of your own position, I mean, as we are now, when are you out of a job, Sarge?
Absolutely no idea whatsoever. The position as it stands is that currently I'm in the European Parliament, still undertaking the duties that I would ordinarily undertake on behalf of the United Kingdom here, but now with additional responsibilities of trying to navigate the Brexit process. And it actually is a highly complex situation that we are in. And I suspect in the coming months I will be spending far more time in Brussels than I ever have done in the past.
So MEPs can impact very much on these negotiations, because it seems to, I guess, a lot of people here that Europe just, they're not going to talk to us till we've kind of done the Article 50 thing and said we're going to come out. We ain't going to talk about anything. So are you actually going to get to talk to anybody?
Well, from the MEP's perspective, there's two aspects to this. One, of course, you can't include all MEPs within this category. Certainly UKIP wouldn't come within it. But those MEPs that have been here for some substantial amount of time and have genuinely constructively worked on behalf of the United Kingdom here, they are people with whom both London and Brussels can engage. Those MEPs are people who understand how these institutions work, they know the way around them, and they know the personalities involved, and they have the credibility and the trust. So that helps tremendously in this type of situation. And then on the other side of it, whatever deal is finalised has to be approved by the European Parliament by way of a vote. And that is absolutely crucial, and it is only British MEPs that are in the most effective position to ensure that MEPs from our fellow European countries understand our perspective and based upon that are willing to vote through in a positive way whatever negotiation is finalised.
OK, stay with us, Sarge. I'm going to talk now to John Tonge. He's a Professor of Politics at the University of Liverpool. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Have you seen anything like this in your lifetime of looking at politics?
It's not that unusual for power to pass from one Prime Minister to another Prime Minister without the British public having a say. It's not a presidential system we have, it's a party system. Theresa May was elected at the last election on the basis of the Conservative manifesto rather than herself, and therefore you don't have to have an election on the basis of a change of Prime Minister.
Sure. I mean, I know Gordon Brown was transitioned into from Tony Blair, but do you think after the Brexit vote, after the sort of polls that are there, do you feel that there'll be a real momentum to have a general election before the end of the year?
I think it would be tricky to have a general election anyway. Firstly, because Theresa May gave herself very little wiggle room in ruling it out at the start of her leadership campaign. And secondly, because of the Fixed Term Parliaments Act of 2011, you need a two-thirds majority within the House of Commons for an election to go ahead. And I think that would be difficult unless Labour wanted to call it on as well. And Labour obviously have their own particular problems at the moment. So it could be a mass act of political suicide for Labour to undertake that. So I think really, although I wouldn't rule out a general election this October, I think it's more unlikely than likely.
But it would be a strange political world, wouldn't it, if Theresa May tried to call an election and then that was not voted for by the Labour Party, and they left the Conservatives in power for another 4 years, 3 years.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's the other thing actually that goes against a general election, though, because it would buy Theresa May another 5 years, but she's already got a long term. She's got till 2020 now anyway, so why not get on with it? And frankly, there's so much to be done, and the country needs stability. So a general election would be a huge distraction, tempting though it may be for the Conservatives, given they would almost certainly, on current poll ratings, beat a Jeremy Corbyn-led Labour Party at least. But I mean, she's got to think immediately about when to trigger Article 50. That's the huge thing that's in her in tray already. And she's got to think about appointing a cabinet, which is tricky, trying to balance those Remain and Leave forces within the Conservative Party, within her cabinet. And, there'll be some people who are disappointed, some people happy. It's very tricky. It would have been something of a disaster for the Conservative Party if the contest had gone ahead. If Andrea Leadsom had won, when, let's face it, 60% of Conservative MPs had voted on the second ballot for Theresa May, that would have left the Parliamentary Conservative Party looking foolish.
Let me leave you there, John. Just very quickly come back to Sarge, who's in Brussels. He's the Conservative MEP for the North West. When should we trigger Article 50?
Well, from a European perspective, there is a very clear desire that this should happen sooner rather than later. From a British perspective, we take a very clear view that ultimately it is entirely up to us as to when we trigger that, and we should only trigger that once we are in a position to know that we can go into effective negotiations. And my own best guess at this stage is that Theresa had indicated that she would trigger it at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, but that may have been based upon an assumption that she would possibly be taking power in September. Now, of course, that whole agenda has been moved forward. We, of course, here in Brussels now have a summer break. And for instance, I asked to meet with a very good friend of mine, the Commissioner for Trade. And I was informed that really now it's going to have to be after the summer break. And one understands that because people are just not going to be in Brussels. So that might get us a little more time, but I think we are looking more towards the end of this year than we are at any point sooner than that.
Thanks to both of you. That was